Hi guys, welcome back to session 71 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. So in this session we will be talking about the reactive forms, and this is going to be the last session for our Angular topics. After that we will move to the other topics like Spring Boot and database management systems. Fine. So in the previous session we spoke about the template driven forms. So if you have not watched that particular session, you just go ahead and watch it. Now the next thing is about the about the reactive forms. So in the previous session I told you about the template driven forms, which is like creating a form at the HTML side, whereas in reactive forms the form will be built at the TypeScript side. So let me first clean up everything that I have written here, and after that I will move to the reactive form development. Okay, so I'll also remove this comment from here. Acha, let it be. For the first example, let that comment be there. So I'm just cleaning up everything that I have written in the previous session. And also, if you notice that in the previous session everything was created at the Angular side, that means at the template side, HTML side, nothing was written in the TypeScript except uh, after submitting the form, what should happen was only the thing that was written here. So I'll clean up everything, so there is as if like it is completely new project. So now the very first thing when you are developing a reactive form is that you have to first include a reactive form module in your app.module.typescript. Okay, this is the first thing that you will include, step one. Now the next step would be what you will be creating forms right from the TypeScript side, not at the HTML side. Now here you create what? You create the form groups, you create the form controls, right? So let's create two of the form control, and we'll put it into a form group and see how are we going to build a form from the TypeScript side. So I'll create a form as an instance is equal to new instance of a form. Okay, so I'll create it as a form group. Now within this particular form group I will create multiple form controls. So while creating a form control, I'll just give some names to this form controls name, or this is of type form control. Okay, so form controls are nothing but what? It's your fields in HTML. We create input type is equal to so and so, right? In we create input type is equal to text type type text name is equal to username, then email, something that we have done in our previous session as well. So I'm creating a form control. Let me create two form controls here, a name and a email, which is again similar to what I have done in our previous session. Previously I was creating all of this name and email and everything at the template side, that means at the HTML side in template driven forms. Since it is a reactive form, I'm creating all of this at the TypeScript side itself. I also want to know if a user fills up these fields, what will be the value of this entire form. So I'll just create a submit function here, and in the submit function I just want to know the values that are entered by the user into this particular form. So I'll just say form, which I have created above. Here you can notice I have created a form here. So I'll create a form and I'll check the value of that so that it gives me the values present into that particular form in a JSON format. So I'm done creating my form at the TypeScript side. Now let us design this at the HTML side. Obviously, so the very first thing would be the form tag has to be added, because once Angular sees this form tag, you already know that it starts adding Angular magic to it, like whether it is touched or not, whether it is pristine, dirty, valid, invalid, all those properties will be automatically added. Now I'm creating a form group. Okay, and now that form group is what? Form. So in previous session we created a template variable here itself. Now we are not creating that template variable there. We are actually trying to bind a property called as form group to our variable that we have created, which is form, which is of type what? A form group. So you can notice that here I've created a form group, and this is something which I'm trying to bind here. So if you remember, we discussed about the property binding, right? So value and everything we used to bind before. Now we are binding form group. Fine. Similarly, now upon submit of this particular form, what I will do, I'll just go for an ng submit, and upon submit of this form, this particular function that I have created here, which is submit, has to be called. So I'll call that. And in the previous session, I passed that template variable here, and I took the values here, right? But in this case, since form is already created at the template side, so I don't need to do all that. Okay, so here is the submit. Upon submit, it goes to the submit function, right? So my form is closed. Now two controls I have created there. I'll be creating those two controls here. So those two controls should be created by using a form control name. So what is the form control name that we have created there? One we have created as name, another one we have created as email, right? So name and email. So one form control name is name, and let's put up a placeholder so that a user understands what needs to be entered, like a name. And then the second thing I'll be putting up as email. So let's add up an email, and let's give a placeholder for the user to provide an email. And also we should have a button of type submit. So we can create an input type is equal to submit, or we can go for a button, and then we can give the type of this button is equal to submit. So once it is created as submit, upon click of this submit, it goes to this form will be submitted. Okay, so let's call it as submit button. Let's save it, and once we are done with this, let's just do a ng serve hyphen o, so that it opens up the Angular application in the browser for us. So this is where you can see that I have created an email and a name, and let us inspect this, and upon click of submit, I should get this data which I have entered over here. So let us give some name, maybe Virat, and an email vk@gmail.com. Okay, so let's just hit submit, and upon submitting on the console, we should get this particular result in JSON format. So we are getting that result in JSON format. So this is the way how we create reactive forms. All the entire form will be built at the TypeScript side. More control will be at the TypeScript side. That's a difference between your uh, template driven form and the reactive form. So this is our day 71. So let's create a repo for the same day 71 demo 1 reactive form. Okay, so for reactive form, almost everything is done. That is, the form group is created at the TypeScript side, form controls are created at the TypeScript side, right? So this is our TypeScript. Most logic will be at the TypeScript. Even the validations will be created at the TypeScript side itself. So in our next example, we will see how do we add up the validations to this. All right, so let's just do a commit changes. We are done with that. Now the next thing, now let's try and do what? Let's try and add up the validations. So if you remember, we used to simply add up the validations into the HTML, like required field validator and email field validator and all that. Now when it comes to the reactive form development, what we can do here is that we have a form control, and for that form control I want to add up a validator. So we can simply go for the validators here, dot whatever validators we want to add, we can add up the validators. Fine. So you might also say, okay, we are providing a required field validator. What if I want to have more than one validator to be applied on one single control, right? So there might be a requirement, like for this email, I want to add up a required field validator. Also, I want to add a email validator. So what should be done in such cases? So the second argument is not just a single object, it can also be an array of validators that you can provide. So if you want to have more than one validator to be applied on the field, at that time you provide in the validator, then you just put up commas, and then you keep providing whatever validators you have. Fine. So I am applying two validators here. One is the required field validator, another one is the email validator. So let's just put up a comma to separate these arguments. So I'll save this. Now I have actually added what? I have added two validators, and the validators are already added at the what? At the TypeScript side itself, right? and upon click of submit, uh, I should see, right, the validation failed and all those things has to happen. So to see that, what I will do is I'll go to the HTML and then put up some message if the validation fails. Okay, so if you remember in the previous case, previous session also, we spoke about something like what, if the form element is touched and if it is not valid, then we used to generate an error. So let's see how do we do that here. So let's add up a paragraph, and we will put up a ng if to check whether the errors are there or not. That means this form control has error or not. So already I have created a form there at the TypeScript side, so I'll go for that form dot. I have form controls, so I'll go for the form controls, and within the form controls, for which form control I'm looking for, see the name is name, which is actually created here. So look for the form control name. This is the form control that I'm looking for, and if this form control dot name is touched, okay, check that whether it is touched or not. And if it is touched and also it has maybe an error, so let's test that. If it is touched and the same form control, so I'll simply copy from here the form dot controls dot name, the same control. If the same control has some error on this, so if it has an error on this, at that time I actually want to uh, do what I want to check, what is it like, dot, if it has error of type required. So in that case I want to just generate something like name is required or something. Okay, so name is required. So let's just save it and test our application. Let's see what it gives us. It may happen that a tag already has been closed. Okay, let's check if the paragraph tag is already closed above or it is not closed. Yeah, it is already closed here. So this name is required. We will go here and put up the name is required here. Let's save it. Now that error should be gone. Or did I close another one? Yeah, form is closed, so I just need to remove that. Let's save it. Now you can see there is no error. Let's go to the browser, and I have added a required field validator on this to check whether it is required or not. That means it has to be filled. And now what I'm gonna do is I will touch this and I'll move away from that. So the required field validation should fail here, right? So the required field validation has failed now. Since the required field validation has failed, we get that particular message here. So similarly, we can also check whether it has the error for email or required and all that. That thing can also be tested. So let me show you how do we do that, since the second form control has two errors on it, right? So a has error will obviously return true there, right? So has error, if it returns true, then we were checking whether it returns true for an email or not, right? Sorry, for the name or not. So this has error thing. So there is another way of doing the same thing. Let's try and do that. First of all, I'll just copy this paragraph stuff here, and I'll put the same thing below this email control. And now I want to test about which control, about the email control. So let's check whether the email is touched or not. If the email is touched, at that time what I would like to do is form control dot email. Now instead of doing the dot has error, I'll check what is it, does it contain error or not. So this is another way of doing it. So does it contain error? So if it contains the error, what type of error it contains, whether it contains the required field error or what. So if it contains that, in that case we are just gonna say that an email will be required. Okay, so let's do that. Email is required. So if it is touched and it is left blank, then it is going to print me email is required. And if it is touched and it has an email format error, that means the user has touched it, entered something, but it is not an email uh, data. So in such case, invalid email format has to be printed, right? So let me check that once again. So I'll create another paragraph and I'm gonna add up the error for email formats. So whether it is touched or not is what something we are going to see, and then the errors is related to the email or what. So if the error is related to an email, then in that case we will say this is an invalid email format. Email format is invalid. So that way we will test it. Now let's save it and go ahead and see the result, where we will first try and do what? We will try and check for the required field validation and all that. So I'll touch the email and I move away from the email. So it says email is required. I touch the email and then I enter something into an email, and now you can see that email format is invalid. That's because I have not entered at the rate anything like xyz.com. So this is the proper format. So when I give it in a proper format, the entire error has gone. That means the validation has passed. So that way we can create validations in reactive form, and you can notice that in the reactive form, validators and everything is added at the TypeScript side itself. That's why at the very beginning of the forms tutorial I told you that template driven form is all about creating the form at the HTML side, whereas a reactive form is all about creating the forms at the TypeScript side. So let me copy this and put it into the repository as well. So this is gonna be demo 2, reactive form validators. So that's my TypeScript and then the HTML. Alright, so we created form groups, we created form controls, and then we also added the validators to it. Similarly, now what we are going to do is that we will try and add up a uh, custom validators. Okay, so there is a possibility that we might need a validator which is not available into Angular. So such type of validators are called as custom validator, where we are going to create a validator. Now what is the need of creating a validator? Let's say for example we want a user to enter a user ID, right? So usually the user IDs do not contain a space, like an email cannot contain a space. Similarly, if I want to have a user ID, maybe Instagram ID or maybe Twitter ID or something, so these IDs, they do not contain any blank space, right? So I want to validate that. I want the user to not give me a value which contains a space. So I don't have any no space validator, right? So I need to create a no space validator in such case. So whenever your validation is user defined, so at that time we create custom validators which are not already provided by Angular to us. So this no space validator is not provided to us, so that is why we have to create a validator. A custom validator needs to be created. So let us see how are we going to create a custom validator. So I'll go to the source and create a new file there, and I will call this particular file as no uh, space validator, or I can call it as no space dot validator dot typescript, so that I understand what exactly it is, right? So let's call it as no space validator. Now for creating these validators, what we have to do is we have to create a function for this, and the return type of this particular function should be a validation error. Let's go ahead and understand how are we going to create that. So an export function, like we used to create export classes, we can even create a function here. Let's call it as no space validator. So this is the function that I'm gonna create for creating a custom validator. So I have a function called as noSpace validator, and the return type is very important for this particular function. So what it is going to return and what arguments it is going to take. So first of all, the argument of this is gonna be of type abstract control. So let's call it as control of type abstract control. Okay, so this is the argument that it takes. Then here is the return type that we provide. So the return type should be validation error. Okay, so here is it, validation error. So it is going to return either a validation error or it might return null. Okay, and then when we return this type of function, at that time uh, the return type has to be provided. Similar return type has to be provided. So we have to do a, I'll just do a return null for now. The moment I do a return null, you can notice that either the function is going to return a validation error or it is going to return null. So I'm just returning a null as for now. So once I return a null, it means it is not going to return anything. So the syntax wise it is correct. Now what I should test is that the control, uh, whatever is provided inside the control uh, should be its index, what you say, its length should be greater than 0. So that's what I want to check. Okay, sorry, it should not contain a space, right? So that's what we are checking. So what we have to do is we have to check whether if it contains the space, and to check whether it contains the space or not, we can make use of an index of space, and that index number should be if it should not be greater than 0. Okay, if it contains a space and the count of that space is more than 0, then it is an invalid uh, validation. Fine, so that's what I want to create. So I'll put up a if condition here. If, let's say, control, this is the control that we are talking about, so on whichever control it is applied, so it will check on that particular control. So control dot value, you have to first check the value, it should contain a value, and you check if the value of that particular control, so let's go for that, control dot value, and in the value we are checking the index of space, index of a space. Fine, and this index of space, if it is greater than or equal to 0, then in that case what we will do is we will say that it's no space validation will be true. So return, we can simply return true, or we can return it as a JSON object, and a key value pair, we can say key no space true. Okay, so let's just save it. Now what we are going to do is that we have just created a validator that checks whether a form control contains a space. If it contains a space, at that time what we are going to do is that we are saying that this is an invalid stuff there. So I need to apply that, right? So let's go ahead to the uh, TypeScript now. We will create another form control here, and we will call that form control as maybe a username or something that should not be that should not contain a space. Okay, so let's put up that, and there should be a comma at the end of this. Yes, and this form control is gonna be a username. Okay, so form control, and here is the validator that I want to apply. First of all, I want to apply a required field validator on this. So multiple validators, we need to take it as an array, right? And the second validator that I want to apply on that is that sorry, it is not coming up from the validators, it is coming up from what, no space validator is something that I have written, which is actually created inside my file. Okay, so this one, no space validator file, so that should be added. You can see that I'm calling that no space validator. Let's save that. So now that we have done that, in the HTML side we are going to check if it is touched, and if there is a no space validator on it, what we are going to do is we are just gonna uh, print a message saying that username cannot contain a space or something like that. Fine, So email is required, email is invalid, and let's have a input form control and all that stuff, and we'll have only one ng if on this. Okay, that's fine. So let's add that here. So input form control name, and this is username that we have created. So let's change that username, and placeholder also we will give it as username. And let's check if this form controls dot username, if it is touched or not. Okay, uh, and what we will do after that it is touched, we are going to check whether it contains the form control dot username dot errors contain what type of error now. So the error we have already created here in the no space validator, that is no space. So I'm gonna check whether it contains a no space error. So if it contains a no space error and if it is touched, so at that time what I'm gonna do is I will say that the username is invalid. Okay, what we have done, user name cannot contain space. So that's what the validator that we have created, right? It should not contain a space. So I've saved it. Now let's check whether our custom validator works or not. So here is a username. I added something on this, and it's fine, right? So email will be required. Let's just give some email, and the name will be required. That's all fine. Now I'm giving this as test, does not contain any space, and it is touched, and the data is provided. All that is fine. So test my data is something which I write the moment I enter a space. You can see that username cannot contain space is given to me. That means the validations that I have done, now that validation is failed, it is giving me that particular error. So this way we can create custom validations and apply the custom validations on the form controls that we have. So it was the easiest form easiest validation that I could show you. So do remember that whenever you are creating a custom validator, you should ensure that the function that you are creating takes a abstract control and returns validation error. So when you are returning a validation error, if you return this as true, it means that the validation has failed, it contains a space, and then at that time return this no space error there. So because it contains a space, the number of spaces will be 0 there. It will contain a space, and if it contains the space, then it means that uh, there is an error, the validation has failed, and that way we can test it. If there is a validation failed there, if it contains no space at that time, it is considered as an error and just tell us that it cannot be a blank space. So that way we can create custom validators. So let me just copy all of this and put this into the repository as well. Demo 3 custom validator, let's call it as no space. And for this you have to create a file, right? So I created a file called as no space validator. You need to create a new file, no space validator, and ensure that you're creating a function and your function syntax is something similar to what I have done here. One, it should take an argument of type abstract control. Second, the return type should be validation error. Now after that, you just go and apply that validation in your TypeScript. Here is the validation applied on the username control, and once you do that, the last thing would be in your HTML, you just display a message if the validation fails, what needs to be done. So I hope you have now understood the difference between a template driven form and the reactive form, and also you got to know about creating custom validations in Angular, and also how do we apply the custom validations. So that's it about the Angular. In our next session moving forward with Java full stack made easy, we will finish off the two things about the database first, that is SQL database we will talk about, and also we will talk about the Mongo database. First we will talk about the SQL database, then we will finish off Spring data JPA with the SQL, and after that what we are going to do is we will talk about the Mongo database, and we will connect the Mongo database with our Spring Boot application. Fine. So from the in the next session we will talk about the concept of SQL, and thereafter we will start up the most awaited topic, and the last topic of our Java full stack made easy will be Spring framework. So see you in the next session. If you're liking the series, do comment and share, subscribe for a better reach. Thank you. See you in the next video.